set up a kitchen, you will have skilled labor, which will convert raw material into your end product, and you will deliver or service the customer. But now you imagine this at one store, two store, possible to do. But the moment you start imagining this, 20, 30, 50, 100, 500,000, just not possible to follow this. And that is one reason why you don't see a large business being built out of India. Now look at Domino's. Domino's today is 1,300 outlets. McDonald's is 600 plus. And they don't follow distributed kitchen model. Okay. Versus distributed infrastructure, what I say, is largely centralized driven. Largely, a lot of work is done at the back end. Okay. Then you basically use supply chain, and supply chain has evolved a lot to move the products to the distribution point. And the value addition that you do at the last mile are very, very minimalistic. Okay, like take a case of McDonald's. McDonald's, basically all the patties that they do is done in Taloja, in Chandigarh, in a place near Bangalore called Madnapalli. And these are the places which service those patties. Okay, these are already pre-cooked. What is happening at the last mile is just getting heated, put it in the bun and serves to the customer. And that is why they are able to build these large distribution networks, but they are not distributed kitchen models. Okay. The biggest risk you run on a distributed kitchen model is you are relying a lot on the last mile value addition, which is practically expecting your lowest denominator in the system, which is your employees at the store, to add the maximum value. Okay, so we believe this is one reason why you have not seen Indian players really expanding in a large way on the distribution side. And globally, if you look at it, it's the other way around. It's the non-distributed infrastructure, which is the backbone of their business. Again, distributed kitchen model, as I said, highly skilled manpower dependency versus process. So we still believe Indian food is art. We all believe this is done by the chef. There's so much of work that goes around. There's massive skill required to do that versus science. And what we believe is clearly every art can be converted into science. And I think that is demonstrated by all the large players globally. It's nothing but processes. And lesser and lesser dependency on the last mile to add value to which will in turn be delivered to the consumer. So this is important. I just thought it's very, very important to understand from the Indian context. Now, supply and demand, we'll just go one by the layers under each. So if you look at it, the supply side is largely, and again, I'm going to take this view from a more organized point of view. Unorganized is really large, which is all street vendors and everybody. I'm not taking that point of view. So restaurants, if you look at, what are they delivering you? They are delivering you experience. Okay. But if you look at the key characteristics of restaurants, they are high capex, high opex, and largely their business is driven through dine-in model. The delivery has just picked up over the last, I would say, 3 years, and incrementally is going up, but it is a high capex, high opex model. Quick service restaurants, again, here you will categorize, and let me just give some example on the restaurant. It will be, let's say, Indigo or a Farzi Cafe in Bombay. So all these players who are trying to now expand on distribution, but they have a high capex and opex model, which typically constitutes of high rentals and high manpower cost. Quick service restaurants, on the other hand, so here you have all the large global players, and you have some Indian players who have come up, including us as well. Again, what we are offering is convenience and price. Your capex is definitely on the lower side than compared to restaurants. Your opex, again, depending upon what model you're following, is going to be from low to medium. And the business is right now equally split between delivery and dine-in. And again, the reason why delivery has picked up because of the food aggregators, which have come up aggressively over the last 3 years. Now, cloud kitchen or dark kitchen, there's a lot of noise around this sector or this space. Just to simplify, cloud kitchen is nothing but cheap rental. Okay, you are just reducing your rental cost rather than being at the front alley or the main street. You are just finding some spaces in the alley or first floor and creating it. So your rentals go down. Okay, nothing else changes. You still have your capex. You still have your manpower out there to convert the raw material into the food. And largely this is only going to be a delivery. 100% delivery happens from these places. Okay. So if you look at the business today, the food space on the organized side is largely distributed among these three. Okay. So on the demand side, if you look at it, what are the consumers expecting, or what are they looking forward to? From the dine-in, they are expecting experience. And this
Sorry,
is
Anurag,
average order value.
Sorry.
But again, this segment of the market is not that big. It's a smaller market. Takeaway, convenience.
Gautam. Hello.
Low, sorry. Hello. So low to medium order value is out here. And delivery is where convenience and prices. So I've tried to just put some averages which are today prevalent in the industry across all these different sets on the consumer demand side.
Anurag, just wanted to ask,
Can you speak a little? Sorry.
In the cloud kitchen with Zomato or Swiggy, because as far as I know their models, it's flat revenue share. You don't have to invest anything in the capex, just working capital involvement and manpower involvement. That's it.
So you are saying in the Zomato, Swiggy, the
cloud kitchen model
structure that these guys are creating now. Okay, so we are running a pilot with them, one of them already. The challenges are that you get tied to one player. One. Okay, so all the demand will be generated by them. That is one. Second, you still need to do your capex, which is your kitchen equipments or infrastructure for that. It is just providing you space for, and then there is a revenue sharing, which is higher than what you pay out there to them as commission. Okay, so honestly, when you look at this model, the payout versus what you are paying, I don't think it works in the favor of these on the owners of the kitchen. The maths doesn't work, and they are struggling with demand.
Plus, they are actually quite selective about where exactly you are being placed, because I do have my kitchen, and what has happened is that we were approached, but then the locations that they are trying to build up new locations where you do not know the market exactly as to where it is going.
Correct. So again, those are, I think each one will follow their own strategy on that. But our take has been, listen, I would rather go to places where, sorry, these are some green arrows I'm seeing on the screen. Any question? Hello.
I think it's part of the presentation itself, if I'm not wrong.
Okay.
I think just one basic question, which is there, Anurag.
Yeah.
Hello. What's the difference?
Just tell me the name of whoever is asking. I cannot see her. I'm sorry. Mukund, you are asking question?
Yeah.
Sorry, you are asking. Okay, go ahead.
What's the differentiator between what you call as a cloud kitchen and a dark kitchen? Is there any fine point?
So no, not really. It is just these things. These nomenclatures have been used interchangeably in the media as well as all that. So that's why I've just ensured that both are there. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. So let me go to this one. This is again part of our internal presentation. I just picked it up because we have been trying to tell the market basically. See, you consume food across all this. So there's a lot of noise around Zomato, Swiggy will rule the food space. Okay. There's a lot of noise going around. These guys are going to, they're well funded. These guys will basically, consumers will only consume through that. But if you think about it, consumers are consuming food across all these touch points. And Swiggy, Zomato, if you really think, are limited presence. Typically, you will consume a Swiggy or a Zomato for calling food to home or an office. That's it. And largely when you want to have your single meal, when you want to consume. Every other time you're going to consume food is going to be either with stepping out or with friends. The moment you're out of your office or home, you're going to touch points across all these places and consume it. So the whole concept that these guys are going to control the whole market, I think we definitely disagree on that front. And so that's not the way food space is going to evolve.
Partha, please put on mute. Partha. Yeah, sorry.
Just again, I thought I'll just touch upon food. What are they bringing on table? They're bringing basically convenience, market expansion, and growth fueled through discounts. I think discounts have become a massive problem over the last 15 months in this market. Okay. These guys are well funded. These guys are just throwing money, and the growth is coming at any cost. And so I thought I'll just put down a little bit of maths around when you do business on your own, which is organic sale, and when you do it through a food aggregator. This is just broad numbers in the market. Okay, so people will operate on both sides of this. I just thought it'll help all of us to understand. So typically, if you look at it, when you do your sales, these are the components. Like you have a food cost, you have other costs, discount, commission. Okay, and the commission part, which goes to the food aggregator. So your net margin when you do sales on your own, typically at the unit level is 40% for that you can make. And then you have your rent, manpower, and every other cost below as a line item. On the other side,
and actually the commission is even higher.
Sorry?
With the commission, this is Spandan here. The commission actually is even higher. It almost touches 30%.
No. So again, I've just put down. That's why I put down averages.
Okay.
The numbers that you see are largely. These are numbers for large players. So we operate at lower commission than this. But I think this has been a typical commission in the market on an average.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So typically, if you look at the moment you operate through these aggregators, and I think that is why the industry overall, pre-COVID, I'm telling you, has been struggling. Okay, because Indian players, as I said, these are largely small players. These are single operators or small operators. Now, for them, the more the business moves from organic sales to these food aggregators, they are getting hit at the net margin level. Their costs are not going down. Their rentals are not moving down. Their manpower cost is not moving down. But if the sales is not doubling up, okay, just simple maths, their net inflow is actually every increase in sale till it doubles up is actually a downward spiral for them.
Anurag, just one question here or clarification.
Yes,
now, looking at the food aggregator sales, now from a box economics perspective, they already have an infrastructure. So what food aggregator is giving them is additional sales. So the point which I'm trying to make is that there's already a fixed cost and there's an existing sales. And then when the aggregator comes in, there's an additional sales. And what you are expensing out is really the variable cost.
No, so I tell you, Sanjeev, what is happening in the market really is the people, okay, it's not an additional sales that is happening. It is a lot of cannibalizing of your existing sales that is happening. So somebody who was doing 10 directly is actually, and let's say the food aggregators have now come aggressively in that space or in that geography, your 10 lakh actually has not moved substantially up. It is still the same, or let's say a 15-20% move up, but you have now at least 50% of the sales is coming through the channel partner. So if you do the maths, there what you were making on a 10 lakh organically coming to you versus what you're making now is actually gone down. So till you don't make 20 lakh sale like this and everything goes through the channel, you are actually losing out. And that has been a problem with the industry. Yeah. See, and that is why if you look, see, being
absolutely agree.
So being an aggregator, and again, this industry is aggregated of small players. They don't have the wherewithal financially. Now look at the industry challenges. Institutional capital is not available. Credit is not available. Okay, this is largely a cash flow driven business. Okay, because you generate cash, you use that cash, deploy it back, and you keep on. It's a velocity of money that you keep rotating. But if you start seeing that inflow, the net inflow starts shrinking down, it has a negative effect on the industry overall. And that acceleration was happening even before pre-COVID. So again, I'm not saying COVID has suddenly done something dramatically for the industry, but these food aggregators, because of the financial ammunition that they are having, and they were up to now chasing growth at any cost, it's see what they were chasing. They're selling you, and I'm sure all of us are. They're even happy to bring in a 20 rupee samosa to your house. Now, there's no economics that can work at this level. Your cost of delivery is 60 rupees on an average. Okay. So you are actually losing money, but because you have institutional capital, the whole industry is paying a price for it. So that scenario, until the market is expanding tremendously, okay, that is scaling up because the market is only expanding on a yearly basis by 7.5%. It's not growing more than that. So it is having a counter effect on the overall industry. See, I'm just giving you a more broad framework on how the industry economics. So this is again a misnomer that, these players are actually adding new sales. They're not adding any, honestly, incrementally, they might have the 15-20% sales.
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, what I have seen is like, say for example, a small polygon that I work within, the pie has not increased, right? So it was always 1,500 customers, and it's still 1,500. Before it was basically those 1,500 customers distributed between these individual players. Now they are being pulled out by the aggregators. So end of the day, no incremental value that is being added to the customer, to the partners, basically.
So you see these guys, what is happening is, so the more shift, okay, going to happen from the left side to the right side. The supply side is going to continue facing pressures, and the foundations are not that strong on the supply side because these institutions or these players are not financially very strong. They're not balance sheet players. Okay.
Of course.
Anurag, I had a question. Your rent plus manpower costs plus electricity plus others, is that below the net margin number right now? Or
yes,
is it part of the cost?
Yes, it is below the net margin number.
So how much would that be? If you're taking a mature store, for instance, how much would that be?
So I tell you some numbers that we operate at. I'll give you a sense on that. So for us, that number will be roughly around 15% for mature store. Okay. So again, the challenge is you take at least 6 months to get to that stage. So you bleed in that 6 months as well.
Okay. And what would your per store economics be like? What revenue per store would you be looking at on a mature for a mature store?
Again, our model, as I said, our model is when we started, we looked at this space and said, listen, we have to turn this whole sector upside down. We cannot build it the conventional way. Okay, so our model is very, very different of what the industry has been doing. So I'll just give you some numbers on this. My average rental across 50 stores is around 40,000 rupees. Okay, my average store size is 330 square feet. My deployment of human capital that I require on a store basis is 2.5 people to run the store. Okay, because we have gone the same way as global large players are building the business, which is going back end. In fact, we work with one of the largest food solutions company in the world, which is the backbone of McDonald's. It's out of Chicago, and we work with them actually in India. Okay, and these guys have some 80 plants across the world, and they are embedded in any large food player you can think of globally. They are in part of the value chain. And we are the first Indian food company, the Indian food portfolio, I will call it, who is part of their ecosystem.
What is their name, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, it's OSI out of Chicago. Privately held company. They're a $8 billion revenue company. In fact, the Impossible Burgers, which is happening, is incubated out there. Chipotle got incubated out there.
Okay.
Okay. So for us, when we look at, so I'm not sharing, this is not my economics. My economics are not like this. I'm just sharing you the economics which are part of the larger food space in the country.
Hi, this is Divya here. I have a question.
Divya.
Hi. So, but see, in the light of COVID, don't you think the food aggregator sales is something that will pick up more?
So
Divya, the next 6 to 8 months.
Divya, I'll come to that. That's why I requested. Sorry if you were not there. I said when we finish the presentation, you can ask me questions on the slide. Then we'll go to all those questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. If I can ask another question. Specifically, you said that your average is about 40,000. So can I understand a little more? Is it more tier 2 cities, or
no,
how is it so low?
No. So I'm based out of Bombay. Largely between Bombay, Pune, we will have around 75% of our distribution.
Okay, because the 40,000 for about 300 square feet is quite low, right? I mean.
Yeah, quite low in Bombay. Yes.
Okay.
No, so that's a challenge,
Because
right?
most of us don't have that this thing. That's the problem.
I'm assuming these are not malls, right?
Sorry?
These cannot be
I'm
malls.
assuming these are not in malls, right?
So we are present in malls as well. So I'm just giving you an average. We are in malls as well, plus high street, plus key areas. So again, our model, as I said, I'll not get into too much detail on the model, but that model is very different what we are following up.
Okay.
So we have eliminated a lot of capex. We have eliminated a lot of human capital intervention. We are largely following the global model on building scale, okay, which allows us to more operate like an FMCG company.
Okay.
That's how you are able to keep your real estate requirement reasonably low.
Okay. Some tips on that will be helpful, maybe offline also, because we are really struggling to keep our real estate costs low, because that's one thing that I'm finding very difficult.
So I'm happy to answer. Let me go to the end and then happy to answer those questions.
Sure. Great. Thank you.
Anurag, one quick one. What I understand from this slide is that your aggregator sales are not really helping. That's what you're trying to say. Because you're saying that your overall numbers,
sorry, Sunil, this is not my representation of my business. I'm saying this is a general representation of the market, because I've spent enough, I've spent 4 years. So this is
I agree to experience. I'm just generally asking this question because somehow it doesn't make sense to me saying that aggregator comes and there should be a push to your sales unless and until the consumer behavior does not change at all.
No, so that's what I'm saying. See, what is happening is incrementally that growth is very limited. Okay. What is happening is largely a lot of players are losing their existing sales, existing customers who used to come directly. Now they're coming through the aggregators. And I tell you the simple reason is Indian consumer is very price conscious. On an average last whole year, the discounts have been running are in the zone of around 30 to 50% with a cap of 120, 30 rupees. With an average ticket value for an individual who is consuming food at 250 bucks, that's a lot of money. Okay. And largely what has happened is because of this discount, a lot of these consumers have shifted to these aggregators. Otherwise, just imagine how do aggregators actually really get customers on their platform. One is they're throwing a lot of money on the brand and marketing, which is one, by delivering convenience. But honestly, a normal Indian customer doesn't care between a Swiggy or Zomato. So far, I think the only matrix they look at is, I want to consume this, who is serving me the cheapest.
Yeah, I know. On both sides, I know a number of restaurants around Delhi NCR which have stopped using these aggregators. And then some of them have started discounting even better than the aggregators, actually. Maybe 5% better.
No, so the challenge is because the discounts have become now part of the industry. So you still only attract those customers who are coming directly to you, right? And offer them something. Okay. So what is happening as a customer think? If I'm consuming in office, I'm actually better off just using a Swiggy or Zomato. Until I'm not stepping out into the market or going and just toiling around to a food court and all that, then I'm going to directly consume. And that is where this slide is important. And here the point I'm trying to make is Swiggy, Zomato will not rule this space. That's not going to happen. People are going to consume food at petrol pumps, kiosks, highways, malls, corporate parks. That is going to be all direct to consumer consumption. And that is going to stay. It's not going to change. And that is, I'll tell you a number as well. The penetration that a Swiggy or Zomato has been able to make today in the overall sector is only 15% of the organized sector between both of them. Should we move ahead with this?
Yep.
Hello, Anurag. Jinesh here. I would just like to share one observation regarding food aggregators in Manila. So I had been working with Wendy's Philippines in Manila for last 5 years. And what we observed and what we did was between 2017 and 2019, a lot of food aggregators came in Manila. So there were approximately 6 to 7 food aggregators there. So we engaged with them very actively, and we saw that our sales went up, delivery sales went up by 30-40%. Our usual delivery sales were like maybe around 5% of our total sales. It went to somewhere around 7 to 8%. So I think it also depends on the kind of a brand and how actively a brand is working with the food aggregators to build up the sales. I think.
So let me give you. So when I'm saying the food aggregators, when this slide you see, and all the comments have been made, keeping in mind that largely India is an aggregation of smaller players. Okay, largely this space. If I now replace and say how Charcoal Eats works with, we work very closely with Swiggy and Zomato, very, very closely. But again, the incentive they have to work very closely with us is because we are a growing chain. We have large distribution. Okay. Now just imagine the food aggregators only have that space, which is the mobile, right? This is the only screen that they can offer you.
Yes.
They don't offer this space to any and everybody.
Exactly.
This is offered to large players. So when I put, let's say 15, 20 brands in this country, including ours, we will obviously be able to work with them. But my whole idea was looking at this space from a larger context, which is the smaller players. Now that's where the worrying signs are. Their margins are getting squeezed. They will not be able to work so intensely with these aggregators. They will be just listed. They will never get the top position, okay, top spaces out here. Because in the larger scheme of things, for the food aggregators, these players are just either one shop or 2-3 shop platforms. Now they will not going to basically put this real estate for that kind of use. But large players, I think the players like McDonald's, Domino's, Subway, you have Rebel Foods, you have us, I think we are working very, very closely with these aggregators. And it makes a lot of sense for us to do that, because when you're looking at scaling this up, I think these aggregators bring in an element which is their strength, which is the delivery of the food. But largely, if I look at the market, I think it will be negative for a larger market aspect, just because of the composition of our market. Because of the existence of smaller players.
This is Alok here, and I just adding on to maybe what Anurag you're saying. I'm not from the food industry, but I guess if online was actually adding so much more to the market, then our growth number should have been far larger, right? But as Anurag is saying, the overall market is not growing as crazy as 50% or any such thing year on year. So which would actually mean exactly. So which would actually mean that online is cannibalizing more than really increasing the market, right? Because 7.5% is almost an organic growth. You would expect a developing economy like India to grow by that much in the food habits. So to me, actually online has pretty much added nothing almost, if I dare say, if I take the extreme view, to say that it's not really been that incremental at all. 7.5% is hardly.
So again, I will react to that by saying, listen, they have added a lot from a consumer side. Because I see, again, I am colored to take this view from a supply side, because that's where I operate and spend most of my time at. But if you think from a consumer side, it has added tremendous value when it comes to convenience, pricing. Though nobody is making money, including them, but I think from what has happened in the market, consumers have been a winner in this. But see,
Anurag, I wanted to add a small thing into this, that you are saying it's largely correct. I agree with that. I'm a very small player in a tier 2 town, but I have made my business in such a manner with these guys that I am actually making money also, and they are giving me incremental revenue as well. What I did was, I have a completely separate menu. I'm a new player. I have a completely separate menu for them, completely separate pricing for them. And I'm using the existing manpower to do everything, whatever is being done for my restaurant. Basically, my only additional cost of a manpower is 1 or 2 people who I'm actually using dedicated for this work. Otherwise, my entire kitchen staff, everybody, it is all capable of taking care of the fine dine part as well as delivery part as well. So at the end of the day, I'm not selling exactly the same things which sell inside my restaurant. I'm selling different things to the consumer, which they demand: cheap, low in quantity, lesser in quantity. I'm selling it to them and I'm making money as well. And they are increasing my revenue by around 60 to 70%. But given the fact that I am a new player, I was not into delivery space at all. So there's no cannibalization for me until and unless they cannibalize the customers who walk into my restaurant.
Correct. No, cannibalization is not happening because you are completely offering a different pricing, different menu, right?
Yeah.
So again, see, our view has been large players. Let me tell you, because you may be a single player, but anybody who has more distribution, these guys will not allow to have a differential pricing. Okay.
So no, a different menu is allowed. A different menu is definitely allowed.
So see, different menu is allowed, but again, so you are able to do it. Let's say a tier 2 town. Which town you are?
Lucknow.
Lucknow. Okay. Got it.
So what you do is that we make meal for one, and we sell it. Shahi paneer, roti, or maybe anything else. I'm a pure vegetarian restaurant. So I do a meal. I do a meal for one, or a thali, or maybe a Navratri special, and I do all of that, which I don't do inside my restaurant. If someone walks into my restaurant and says I need a meal for one, I don't offer it inside. You get a proper full fine dine meal.
No, fair enough. Again,
so there are different models that actually work, but you're right. Largely, they only cannibalize things, and they are a negative impact on the margin. But for us, it did not work that way.
No, fair enough. So largely, again, I'm not saying this is going to be 100% applicable all across.
Yeah, there will always be unique cases, right? I think we're looking at the industry overall rather than individual cases, because there'll be enough losers and there'll be enough winners. That's why the industry will be at a certain trend. So probably getting down into each individual case.
But let me point it out that this is not the case only in Lucknow anymore. It's actually being copied across. You can see a lot of restaurants in NCR also, which are giving an absolutely different menu online, which is cheaper. And once you walk into their outlet, you will never realize that he can give a 110 or 120 rupee chola bhatura. That outlet would be much different. So there are models that are being adopted. It's not a one-off case.
Gautam, Alok, Anurag, I would request you that you finish your presentation so that the flow is there. Else, you know.
For sure.
Yeah. Thanks.
So again, this is something I've already mentioned, so I'm not going to spend any time on this. So if we now look at impact of COVID, I think this has been largely for the last, I would say, 45 days. The industry has fallen off the cliff. Because if you ask me, I think the sales are practically down by 90%. Maybe in some cases, just completely shut down. And I'm just going by the order of impact that will happen. So again, this is which is going to hit the most because of the, again, the way Indian industry is structured, cash flow. Because we are largely a weak balance sheet play, because of the size and each player, people who, or the platforms who will not be able to really swim through this period will find it very difficult to survive. Okay. Because rentals are continuing, they need to still get down, negotiate that, salaries need to be paid. I think the longer this shutdown stretches, smaller players will find it very difficult to get back on their feet. People who don't, let's say, where there's no reserves to really absorb this shock. Second will be manpower. Largely, again, because of the distributed kitchen model, we have heavy reliance on manpower, the skilled labor. And there is a lot of dislocation that has happened for this labor. The challenge will be how quickly this labor can be brought back to get the supply side started. Obviously, assuming that the lockdown gets over as we move forward. Demand, my view, and again, I strongly believe, I think it's a question of, I will go for a 3-month view, that in 3 months time from once this, let's say May starting, things start opening up. I'm talking about May, June, July, and early August. Things should start reasonably back in shape. Okay, for at least the convenience, quick service, delivery. I think restaurants will find little challenging. It will stretch for them I think on the outer side to 6 months. And I said, delivery business will pick up the fastest because again, from a consumer side, people will be more than, I think people have been bound inside their houses. I think this is one thing that will pick up very, very quickly. Again, the only challenge out here will be how quickly Swiggy's and the Zomatos of the world can bring enough feet on street to address this market or this expansion. So that's how I see the impact. So you will have, see, because just look at the number, 7.5 million people are employed by this sector. That's 75 lakhs. That's a lot of people. I think we need to look at, or I don't know how the government is going to support this sector because this is the least supported sector from all point of view. The regulations are reasonably stringent. You don't get any GST credits. Input credit is not available. So it will, just give me a second. So we will see this, I think smaller players getting impacted in a larger way. Then I think these are the, sorry, these are some of the trends we see on the medium to long term. So I'll let everyone read it because there's no point in repeating what is written on there. So with this, largely we are, I think I'm done with the thoughts. If there are any, now we can open it up for questions, whatever, thoughts, suggestions.
This is Darshan. So,
hi Darshan.
From an operating angle, since it's a very thin margin business, can you give some pointers on actually working out the menu itself so that your inventory management becomes more sharp and your, wastage and therefore savings in the inventory can be improved? These are all operating issues which a lot of these small shops may not be able to do, but if you can guide on that, it would be very interesting because as you come out with larger and larger menus, it's very important to manage the inventory, which drives the entire working capital cycle for you.
Correct.
You could not hear me?
Sorry, Darshan.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I missed it.
Now?
My apologies. I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, so I said, can you give an input on the operating side? Because what we heard is more of the real estate side. But on the operating side, since you have larger the inventories in terms of menus large, so therefore the inventory would be large. Are there any pointers as to how you control inventory and how do you save? There's a lot of wastage when you manufacture food. How do you save food? How do you work out the inventory so that you can bring that cost under control and therefore improve the margins?
Yeah, so I tell you, see, we were very clear. If you have to build a large business, it cannot be a distributed kitchen model. So from day one, our whole focus was how do you back-end everything? Like a McDonald's, Domino's, all these guys. So today, what we operate at, and we are a zero wastage company as we speak. There's no raw material that comes to my distribution point. We work with these large players at the back end. We already converted this food from an art into science. We work with processes. So all our food largely is back-ended, moved around through cold chain, reaches the last mile. So there's very minimalistic intervention that happens at the last mile. And because of we use temperature as our friend, so we have a shelf life on our products. So that allows us to operate at scale and with very, very capital and operational efficient manner.
And just a quick question, a supporting question on that. When you say back-ended, most of it would be third-party manufacturing, right?
So again, or
it's your own kitchen?
No. So these are large infrastructure.
Okay.
When I'm talking about, as I mentioned, I think we work with the same player as who works with McDonald's worldwide, these are like industrial scale production capacity. Okay. So the standards, the hygiene, the raw material that comes in, those are very, see, that gives us a good sleep in the night because those standards are very, very high. I clearly know in each of my product what raw material is going, because all this is as part of the value chain.
Okay. Okay. So what would you suggest? Like, see, you have the option of going with, say, OSI, right? For that matter.
Correct.
So
Correct.
in case of a smaller player, so what would be like? Do you suggest going out for a smaller third-party contract manufacturing, or do you do centralized kitchen and then do a manufacturing there and then move on to the distribution center?
See, again, it's a question of scale, because the scale that we operate or large players operate at, because a complete back-end model makes a lot of sense when you can get efficiencies of scale as well, operating efficiency.
Okay. Okay.
So, and because a lot of large players will not even entertain small players, they'll simply don't have the possibly these
bandwidth.
Not, I would say the bandwidth. It'll not make sense for them to even run those lines for, let's say, a 500 kg or 1 ton order.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, the question is what size you operate at. If you're on the lower side, I think if you're running 1, 2, 3 kitchens, I think continue doing that. You cannot, I think the efficiencies that you can control at that level will be the highest when you can oversight them. Anything larger than possibly, I would say 10 distribution points, you should explore central kitchen that you can run on your own. Okay. And anything beyond that, as you building scale and imagining scale, I think these models will just not help you to scale the business.
Anurag, can I just jump in there? I think there are also options just that I'm aware of. I'm not in the business, but I'm aware of people who do supply to industrial canteens and to fine dining restaurants. So a lot of the sauces and a lot of the last mile curry formats are already available in a industrial manufactured.
So Darshan,
so those are all last mile stuff which you can
let
do.
Let me intervene. This is because
at a QSR, yeah.
Okay, so I think what are we building at the end of the day? Food. We are when we are building or when we are looking at this space, we say food is our core. Okay, you can build a brand on this nucleus, which is the food. Now, if I take sauces and all that are already available in the market, I'm actually trying to mix it together and give you something which we may not believe is the highest standard. When I'm saying food, is our focus is not only just working with a outside vendor. Our focus is what is, so we have in-house, we have a full team of food. Okay, one of the guys got trained by Gordon Ramsay. So 3-4 people are there who we do the art, which is still very core to us inside our company. We take that art and work with these partners to transition into science at scale. So because if the outcome is not what we want, that is where we'll start building just a Me Too business. Because in a food business, food is everything. You will consume me once, twice, 3 times, 10 times because of the food, not of any other thing. And that is something we as food companies, we need to control. When you are running a single kitchen, why you want to control all the art? Because you know what you are delivering to the consumer is the reason why the consumer keeps on coming back to you.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, so I'm just saying we have a lot of players come to us with all these sauces and all that. I think the quality that we want as an outcome, and when I say quality, it also means the input that is going in, plus the taste and the flavors and the sanctity of the product. I think that's the key to us.
Yeah, Anurag, while you are on that point,
yeah,
when you came to taste and the consistency that you have,
right.
Interestingly, across India, and I know it from ITC Foods, the requirements change from city to city or zone to zone. So how do you manage that piece? Because the taste requirements are completely different as you move from north to west to south.
Correct.
And east.
Absolutely right. So I think for us right now, if you look at it, our large operations are in the city of Bombay, Pune, okay, which is largely there. So this is a very heterogeneous space. We get a lot of feedback from our customers. So we have served up till now more than 2.5 million customers. And there's a lot of data that we have aggregated over a period of time, which helps us to then start creating layering around what taste preference people have. And before we enter any of the markets, we are very clear that we want to do some pilot testing out there before we get into that market. So those are the ways we look at it. And if there are changes required, again, changes cannot be brought because you want to open one store. Changes can be only brought in if you want to, let's say in a Delhi, we want to open 50 distribution points. Then I think there's a lot of far more work which will go in and will be brought in as part of the food understanding before we get into that market. So,
Anurag, question. This is Ashwin. Two questions. One is on the in terms of the stores, you mentioned that your per store rental is quite low. How did you manage that? Was that something from get-go? Do you plan something like an unserved location? How do you actually identify and kind of zero in on that? Do you work with a partner there? That's one of my main questions. The other questions I'll come back to later.
So again, from day one, we were very focused that listen, in running a distributed business, you need to keep all your costs reasonably in check. Okay, your fixed cost. And our whole model is built in such a way which I can actually operate in 200 square feet as well. Okay. So our business model allows us to operate at the last mile in minimalistic space requirements. And that allows me to keep my rental and the lower end. Now, markets like, just take an example, if people are familiar with Bombay, Lower Parel. Lower Parel is one of the most expensive real estate, okay, that you can get. But it's also one of the largest markets of food delivery in the country. Now, our space out there is actually less than 40,000, 33,000 rupees out there. Okay. It's a question of, again, the model fitting into the space. And a space of 330, that's the average, 330 square feet is our average requirement that we have. That today we operate 50 stores at. I think you can find in those real estate or in that pricing.
Okay.
Anurag, question, Samir. Do you manage your own cold chain or do you have some other products or Snowman?
Do you manage what?
Your own cold chain?
No, I don't manage. We work with a company called Cold Star.
Okay. And what percentage of your...
So we are very, Samir, the whole business model is absolutely asset light. We own the product, we own the brand, we own the distribution points, but our whole industrial production facility is with the US guys, then our cold chain is a very large player. So I think wherever it comes to asset heavy model, we like to partner with players.
And how about apart from Zomato and Swiggy, do you also do, this is Pandan here, Anurag. Apart from Zomato and Swiggy, do you also do your own delivery? If you do, it's your own delivery fleet or you're doing it through a third party?
We don't do our own delivery because I think that's not our core competence. Let Swiggy, Zomato do it. But a lot of our stores have dining capabilities, so on an average around 12 to 16 seats. So consumers walk in and that's our organic sale that we do. Large orders to come directly to us, that is delivered by us.
Okay. Just a quick question. Now, when I'm thinking of the post-COVID situation and with new regulations coming into picture, I actually run a cafe in Gorakhpur also. We were around. This is the first cafe. This was the first cafe in Gorakhpur. It's 5 years old. So what happens is we were around 18 covers, right? So now with the new regulation from NRAI, there has to be a 2-meter gap, etc., between tables, etc., right? These are small things that have come in, which would make a lot of difference because, so how do you cope with that? Because what I understood from you, your store sizes are not that huge to have that kind of a gap, right?
Correct. No, so again, as we speak, I think the business is completely shut down.
Okay.
So in not only us, this is largely, I'm telling you, the whole food space, 90% is shut down, right?
Yeah.
There's hardly any demand which is coming up. And these regulations are again, I run a business, so I continue to be optimist all the time. I think these regulations will remain for a while. And again, my view is this will, on the outer side, will be, let's say, July end. I think that's when it should last. Anything beyond that is anyway a problem for the whole world. So we are in the same boat then. So it should not.
Okay.
Anurag, wanted to ask you, the business is shut because deliveries are off or because customer demand is not there? Because in Noida,
it is,
deliveries are on.
Yeah, so deliveries are on means deliveries are on, but the feet on street is very minimalistic. Okay. And demand from consumers is absolutely down. Yeah, no, but people are not taking chances right now.
Yeah.
It's more the demand.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that I would totally agree, because when I speak to the Swiggy and the few Swiggy and the Zomato delivery guys around my place, I'm based out of Noida, Gotham. So normally they used to deliver around 18 to 20 deliveries per day. Correct. Which now has come down to around 4 to 5 at the most, if they happen to get.
Yes.
So that's how
absolutely
it's placed in Noida.
So I think this situation will continue over the next 3 weeks. I think till we continue to be in negative zone as far as the information is concerned on the overall environment. But I think once things start shaping up, we start getting more clarity on what we are seeing on the other side. I think people will continue to eat. I don't see there's going to be any halt on that front. It's just a matter of time. So it's a question of your patience to just go through this period.
Anurag.
Yeah, a question.
I'm Vince. I'm from the Philippines. I have a restaurant in Makati, the business district of Manila, and I just want to thank Nikhil for inviting me here. I just have a question. Here in the Philippines, obviously we're still shut down, just like you guys, especially here in Manila. I expect this situation to, like what you said, will probably proceed up to about may extend up to June. In the management of cash flow, while we are not generating revenues, what would be the last component of the cost that you need to keep so that when operations go back, we're allowed to go back to operations, at least you have something to fall back on? Because right now, obviously, I care for my people, so I still have to pay their salaries, but at some point that's going to dry up. But I need to keep some sort of artillery so that when operations are back, I have enough to launch again the business. What will be the last component of the cost that you need to keep so that you can be sure to go back up?
See, our view is that, right now, what is the most important thing? You need to think about human life.
Yeah.
Okay? And I think people who have been with us for 4 years and stayed on our side, I think we need to ensure that we do everything that they can go through this period. Okay. So we are focused on that. We are saying, listen, all our people, and anyway, we are not, when I look at the number of people that we have versus others, I think we are reasonably okay in that front. But I think the key is to ensure that you deploy all your resources right now to ensure that this set of people stay with you, because at the end of the day, when you want to get started, I think you will need the people to get you back on the feet. Because in our business model, I think everything else is reasonably intact. My supply chain or my manufacturing capability, my distribution points, but it is the people that I will worry the most.
Okay.
I had a question. One suggestion, and this is coming from a totally non-food background. One of the things that I have done with some of the vendors that we are working with in our industry is that we have told all the vendors, you know what, we really appreciate your business, but we want like a 50% discount at this point of time. That's something you can try with your landlords and stuff. You can just tell them, listen, the situation is like that. It's unprecedented. That's just just work for us.
No. I am very clear. See, with empathy on all sides, everybody understands this is not our doing. This is not in our control, right? Nobody can control something like this. So this has happened, and this stick is equal for everyone. So my sense is, and we work with large vendors, so I think that understanding at a human level is already there. We are very clear that, see, if you kill me, if I don't exist, just forget everything else. There's no business. I think the idea is that how do we keep the machine reasonably oiled that starts moving? Now, that is where all our vendors, partners, cold chain, everybody comes, even employees. We said, listen, you cannot pay full, but I'll give you enough so that you survive this period, right? Everybody expects that listen, can we be together to see the other side of the situation? Can we cross together? I think that's the key. So for us, I think we are very clear that we will sit down on table with everyone as we go ahead. And we don't think people are that unreasonable. I think see, you cannot get out of this by saying, listen, I will win and you will lose. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
I think we both give a little bit. I think we can all cross together. So our view is cut anything into 50-50. There's no heartburn in that because it's equal. So far both parties can agree. I think we can move forward.
Anurag, just a question out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Did you have any natural calamity clause in your rent agreements that you sign with your landlords? I
don't know. My legal team looks at it. Must be there because we use lawyers. So all those clauses should be part of it.
Okay.
I'm hoping we don't need to walk that path. I don't want to. I just want to
right.
sit across as human beings and say, listen,
Yes.
this is it. Let's just. I think we have been together with a lot of our players for the partners for last 4 years, guys. I think anybody who comes to me and says, listen, Anurag, let's sit down and just, this is what we can do the best as human beings. I think that should work right now.
Absolutely.
Just one thing, Anurag, sorry to interrupt you. Just one more thing. I do understand the salary part, etc. Right? Like for example, I'm my helpers and my chefs, etc. I'm paying my salaries, but there is another problem which is coming out, or which I'm facing at the moment is these guys. They are let go in their salaries also, and they are ready to move back home. Basically, the sentiment now within my employees is something like once this is over, I would reach back home. I don't want to stay outside my hometown. Basically, that's what I'm facing at the moment. In spite of paying
So just look at the numbers here. I mean, the 75 lakh people are employed in this industry. If everybody's going to go home and sit in their villages, I don't think that is going to work. Okay. On an average, we pay people anywhere between 15 to 20,000 rupees. Now, the kind of money they cannot make in their villages. So I think, and see, if I look very selfishly, my business, I'm saying, listen, I need possibly 100 people to employ as we go ahead. Okay. So this will be available because a lot of other places will not be able to come back to business. There will be many people who will need the jobs. I don't think this is honestly my worry.
Okay.
There will be enough people available to pick it up. Because
who will be willing to learn and work in this industry as well. Yeah, right.
See, it's very important, right? We are not a rich country, right? The government is going to feed everybody to a while. Beyond that, they are not going to do that.
Yeah. I think it might be a temporary sentiment among the workers as well. Now that they are not able to.
See, I call it, and this is very interesting. I call it the glamorized virus. This one. There's so much of negativity that people are just only looking at that data, right?
Yeah.
Now, when everybody's going to look at only negative data, you're not able to see and plan and say, listen, if this lasts forever, we are dead as human race. Then let's go and party here.
Of course.
Correct. I don't see that happening. I'm very clear. It's just, I think it's a matter of time. You cannot do it. Just as a human race, you cannot do it.
Anurag, one question about the. One second. Sorry. What is a kitchenless, flameless model? How does it work at the store level?
Sorry, kitchenless?
Flameless model. I read on your website, kitchenless, flameless model. How does it work at the store level?
Store is, which I said, so largely all our work on the food happens at the back end. So that allows me to ensure that the raw material is absolutely up to the mark. We work with all the large players.
But how do you heat it up? I'm assuming it's pre-cooked, but how do you heat it up at the store?
Yes, so it's a flash heat model that we do.
Okay.
We have fabricated ovens, electric ovens. So we don't use gas at the stores. Okay. So that is why our model allows us to just bring anybody at the back end and he just need to press some buttons. I'm not expecting anything more from that person.
Something like the Subway kind of.
Yes. Because that is a model which can scale up. Okay. We clearly see distributed kitchen models, and I think they are just look very good on Excel sheets with processes and with training and all that. They are not executable in this country.
Agreed.
And Ranjit,
yeah, go ahead.
your stores, all of your stores are company owned, or are you franchising as well?
60% is balance sheet, 40% is franchising. We are not doing any more franchising. We are converting all franchising to balance sheet.
All right. And the second question is, you if you don't want to answer, you may not.
Yeah.
What at the store level, the box economics, what would be your net margins as a percentage to sales? You mentioned it's around 40% for the market.
No. So 40% is basically when I said the organic sales you do, that was more of the industry.
Okay.
So steady state basis at the store level, we should be able to make anywhere between 15 to 20%.
15 to 20%. NIC.
After all cost.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
That's it. Thanks. Nikhil, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, because it's already 5:10, and I know it's a very interesting topic. And Anurag, thank you very much. You have given us a lot of food for thought. And,
No, thanks, guys.
And you are the Greta Garbo of our Mumbai group. You hardly come for an event. So it is good that you are here on the webinar. Next time for an event in Mumbai, we'll see you. And thank you very much. Thank you very much on behalf of AIMA. Thanks.
Absolutely. I enjoyed talking to you guys.
Awesome talk. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Anurag.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nihil. Thank you. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, Anurag.
Thank you, Anurag.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Anurag. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.